There is something happening to men that we are pretending not to see. Not because it is rare, but because it has become normal. Men are no longer embarrassed by behavior that should humiliate them. And the frightening part is not the behavior itself, it's the comfort with it. Men are now begging casually. Men are now leaning openly. Men are now surviving shamelessly. And no one is calling it for what it is. So today, I will. Let me be clear about who this is for. I'm talking to men who are physically capable, men who are mentally sound and fully grown, but for some reason have become comfortable positioning themselves to be taken care of and carried by others. Men who soft beg instead of building. Men who fish for sympathy instead of improving. Men who broadcast their needs instead of handling them. Men who expect understanding instead of earning respect. Now, if that description annoys you, then you are the one I'm talking to. That irritation is usually what the truth feels like before it sinks in. Men used to protect themselves. Now they don't. There's a type of shame men used to have, not the toxic shame. I mean, corrective shame. The kind of shame that says, I won't beg for what I can earn. I'd rather walk away than debase myself. I will suffer quietly rather than lose my self respect. That shame is disappearing. Modern men are no longer embarrassed by living off women or mixing honest work with begging, fishing for sympathy, debasing themselves to earn favors. And when shame disappears, boundaries collapse. A man without shame will usually beg without flinching, feel entitled to your generosity. He will resent you when you say no to him. And this is the first fracture. Let me explain how this shows up in real life, not theory. First, you see it at work. A man does his job. You ask him a simple question: how much? Instead of answering, he starts a performance. Extra friendliness, false respect, unnecessary praise. That is not kindness. That is social begging. It's a man saying, without saying, I am not confident enough to stand on my work. So I'm hoping my humility makes you generous. That is psychophancy. And let me make that word plain. Psychophancy is when a man deliberately lowers himself to extract favor. Secondly, you see it with money. Men borrowing without urgency, borrowing with no real pressure to repay. A man who still has his dignity feels discomfort when he owes, but a man who has lost it feels entitled to your patience. That difference tells you everything. Thirdly, you see it in relationships. Men shamelessly living off women with no clear plan, no timeline, no urgency to stand again. Not because life knocked them down. True, that happens. But it's usually because dependency no longer embarrasses them. That's not survival. That's freeloading with excuses. Let's be honest. This is not poverty. Stop hiding behind that word. They have always been poor men. And poor men still carry themselves with shame. Poor men still carry themselves with dignity. Poverty did not erase pride. Hard times did not erase boundaries. What we are seeing now is different. A struggling man is usually ashamed to ask. However, a dependent man is offended when he asks and you don't give. This is comfort seeking masculinity. Men choosing the easiest arrangement that keeps them fed, sheltered, and unchallenged. Men who would rather be helped than hardened. Now, here's the real shift, plain and simple. Men stopped asking, what preserves my self respect? Instead, they started asking, what makes life easier right now? Men chose comfort and laziness over dignity and self respect. And once that choice is made, begging becomes logical, scrounging becomes normal, dependency becomes survival, dignity stops being protected, and a man who treats dignity as optional will always treat it anyway. Now, let me explain how this creates angry and bitter men. Begging doesn't usually end where you think it does. A man who survives by begging, openly or indirectly, eventually resents anyone who refuses him because begging does not produce gratitude. Begging produces entitlement, entitlement to tips, entitlement to support, entitlement to housing, entitlement to understanding, and even money they have not earned. A man who gets used to receiving without earning stops improving. He stops respecting others. He starts resenting anyone who says no to him. And that resentment doesn't disappear, it mutates. It mutates into bitterness towards women, hatred of successful men, contempt for discipline. It doesn't stay quiet. It usually becomes anger, then hostility. So, this is how weak men turn into societal liabilities. Let me speak about how fathers have failed, and I'll say it without sentiment. Let me say this plainly. Many men were never shown how a man is supposed to carry himself. They never watched their fathers stand firm on their values or refuse help, help that came with humiliation. They never saw their fathers carry pressure without collapsing into complaints or walk away from disrespect. Instead, many men were raised by absent fathers, overprotective mothers, accommodating communities, cultures built on pity, and systems that subsidized weakness. So they never learned this hard truth. A man should rather bleed than beg. Now, that's not because bleeding is good, but because self respect matters more than comfort. That explains the behavior, but it does not excuse it. Here's the adaptation nobody wants to name. Many men now survive by appeal, not ability. They rely on charm instead of real skill, psychophancy instead of usefulness, emotional pressure instead of actual output. That might keep you around. It will never make you respected. Men who live like this are usually tolerated. They are not trusted. They are not followed and they are not admired. And deep down, these men know it. The truth is this: begging is not actually the disease, begging is the symptom. The disease is actually a generation of men who were never trained to carry themselves like men. Now, listen carefully. This is not ideology. This is not branding. This is reality. A man is supposed to be able to take care of himself at the very least. That means He does not organize his life around begging. He does not rely on pity as a strategy. He does not survive by lowering himself. Yes, help can come. Yes, support can come. But his identity is not built on begging and receiving. The moment another adult controls your survival, you have lost control of your life. Have regard for yourself. Value your work. A man who believes his effort has values, he usually speaks plainly. He accepts rejection without groveling. He improves instead of begging. However, a man who doesn't performs humility. He flatters excessively. He resents quietly. He begs indirectly. Behaviors always exposes belief. A man who shamelessly lives off a woman cannot lead her. That is not hatred. That is reality. Dependence kills respect. It kills attraction. It kills authority. Of course, two adults can build together. However, one adult carrying another breeds contempt, even when no one says it out loud. This message is not for everyone. Let me be clear. This is not for men who want reassurance. This message is not for men who want excuses. It's not for men who want to be told they are trying. This is for men who want their spine back. Men willing to be uncomfortable. Men who would rather bleed than beg. Men who would rather be left alone than undignified, than insulted. Rebuilding dignity is not glamorous. It looks like saying less, working harder, depending less, standing longer, accepting silence. No one claps for this. That's how you know it's real. Now, here's my final verdict. I will end with this and I won't dilute it. A man can accept help in real crisis. But the moment he builds his life around begging and receiving, he has already given something up. Not money, not opportunity, his dignity. And once that is gone, everything else follows. Sit with that.